What we see most every day is this vast, boundless sea. As the sun rises, our strongest hope is for our motherland to grow stronger and more prosperous.
Our podcast this week was introduced by China Coast Guard Officer Zhao Xinjiang. He was speaking on a mission to the Scarborough Shoal, or in Chinese, Huangyandao. His mission, he said, was to protect the ecology of the area, which China's designated a natural park. But the waters he was in, according to the UN, fall under the authority of the Philippines.
This week, we will be taking on a journey to the South China Sea, looking at a geopolitical game of Monopoly as rival states seek to grab empty properties and build on them to get the upper hand. We will be hearing about some very dirty tricks, some cunning ruses, and the battle lines in the world's most contested waterway.
Before we start, quick note that we'll be using English names mainly for the features and locations we mention, which is definitely highly contentious, but because each place has as many as 5 different names, we just can't use them all and it's going to get very clunky. So let's just say that our use of names is for the convenience of our audiences and to save us the embarrassment of mispronunciation, but it doesn't apply our support or our acknowledgement of the claims of any other parties.
Here at Global South World, we frequently feature videos of a cat and mouse game of dangerous maneuvers and occasional collisions between ships in the South China Sea. On the bridge, you can usually see sailors filming each other. Sometimes there are water cannons and recently, crews have belonged to the Coast Guards of the Philippines and colleagues of our friend Xinjiang from China. Sometimes, these fishermen get caught up, but unwittingly perhaps used as a civilian pawn by one side or the other.
And Logan, where you are in the Philippines, I guess you're seeing these quite regularly. How often are you seeing these kind of conflicts in the news, these kind of clashes going on in the sea?
I mean, here from Manila, the news have been on and off, especially about the South China Sea. But when there are collisions, you can expect it to dominate the headlines the following day.
Yeah, the Chinese frequently say that it's actually the Philippine authorities who are doing the maritime equivalent of bussing in fake fishermen and effectively trying to create a clash or to help activate their claims to have fishing rights in the area.
And the Philippines make the same claims, sometimes on the industrial scale at which only China can organize and dominate things. But that's one of the more innocuous tactics that we have seen used to assert sovereignty. There's a much more pernicious and brazen approach, particularly connected with China, which is the construction of man-made islands.
Yeah, and the scale of this is really mind-boggling. I mean, it's been nicknamed the Great Wall of Sand because there's so much of this going on. So tell us how it works, Logan. How do they do this?
Well, China currently employs a process called dredging, where boats literally hoover up sand from the ocean floor and then drop it onto reefs to build them up above the waterline. And these concrete walls are effectively dropped around this new sand to stop it from being eroded away, and where once perhaps just a small rock exposed at low tide, there is now a permanent island. And the scale of this is truly immense and shocking. One ship, the Chan Kun Hao, nicknamed the Island Maker, can build an island in just a few weeks by piling up 6,000 cubic meters of sand per hour.
It's an astonishing scale of geoengineering. And as you can imagine, right, it's massively destructive because living on the seafloor, there's all kinds of organisms. You've got fish, you've got plants, and around there especially, you've got some corals, really beautiful, really ecologically valuable corals. And these are completely wiped out when the area gets dredged. I mean, you can imagine this huge machine basically just sucking everything up. And then more than that, it's also disturbing the sand and the silt and spreading it through the sea. And that's blocking out the sunlight, which many of these organisms need to survive.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, the effects of this go far beyond politics. It affects the environment as well. By changing the shape of the seabed, the coral dredging has even altered currents and potentially change the impact of storms and typhoons.
And if you want to understand why all this is happening, because this is obviously an enormous effort, a very expensive effort, a very complicated effort, You just need to look at one of the islands. So if we take the example of Fiery Cross Reef, which was named after an English tea clipper, which ran aground there more than a century. This island is isolated, right? It's roughly equidistant from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from Vietnam, but it's controlled by China. And it's been built up regularly over the last decade, massively. You can see there's a spit of land, if you look on a map, which has been built out for a huge runway with hangars for military aircraft. There are accommodation blocks. There's even a running track, tennis courts, a swimming pool. And this is on an island which is barely a couple of 100 meters across. It's literally a bastion of Chinese might, a castle, an outpost far away from the country's mainland. And it's an attempt to claim the waters around it and any oil, gas, mineral, or fish which are found there for Beijing.
That's really not how it works. The rules which govern who controls the sea are overseen by the United Nations as part of UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, signed by most countries of the world with the exception of several avoiders like the United States, North Korea, Venezuela, Turkey, and a few more others. These rules state that countries can enjoy exclusive economic zone, which stretches out 200 nautical miles from their coastlines. Crucially, this would include islands. So, if you have an inhabitable island under your jurisdiction, you can go out and claim the fish and drill for oil all around it. But here's the thing, artificial islands don't count. Otherwise, you could just go and drop a load of rocks anywhere in the sea and then claim rights all around it. In 2013, the Philippines got fed up with China's claims and took a case to the UN, which ruled a couple of years later in Manila's favor. This is a landmark ruling that China has consistently rejected. Almost all the claims made by China of the Philippines were judged invalid.
Yeah, but as you say, Logan, China's basically ignored that. It says the ruling is null, it's void, and it still is claiming around 90% of what it calls the South China Sea, based around the infamous 9 So this is essentially a line which is compulsory on official Chinese maps. And it sort of drops down from the south coast of China and loops right down along the coast of the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, basically claiming all of that area. And it's based on historical facts that China says, look, these low-lying islands, they've historically been part of us. We've fished around here. This is part of our country. And confusingly, the Republic of China, which is generally known to the world as Taiwan, makes a similar claim that it should control the region because it has an 11 which goes around the same kind of area.
As you've said, this claim was originally more expansive. The People's Republic of China, or let's just call it China, originally had 11 dashes, but they removed two of them, as part of a diplomatic entente with North Vietnam.
Yeah, and I think that shows how political this is because, these claims are all subject to negotiation, relationship, and facts on the ground. And these maps, they're hugely important because they, like I said, they get used later as evidence of these historical claims. Look, we've got this map from this time and it shows that this was part of our, claims back 100 years ago, 200 years. But UNCLOS just rejects that kind of claim because, clearly one country could have controlled land at one point in history, another country had it at another time. Which point in history are you going to choose? So it's not really a good basis for international law. But it does carry a lot of weight often with domestic audiences. And you can just look at the justifications Russia's using for its war with Ukraine to understand that, people really relate to this. Historically, this land belongs to us. We must get it back. We must keep it. If we go back to the South China Sea, though, some parts of the seabed, extraordinarily, are simultaneously claimed by China, by Malaysia, by the Philippines, by Vietnam, and by Brunei. And as we've seen, the building these military bases is one tactic that's being used to enforce these claims. Another one is building weather stations and lighthouses because that shows responsibility for maritime safety. And the Philippines even has a World War II ship that it deliberately grounded on a shoal. And for the past 25 years, it's kept a permanent garrison of soldiers.
As we've mentioned from the start, The South China Sea is one of the most contested waters in the world, and there have been clashes in the area for decades, initially Vietnam and China, but more recently, as we have seen, with the Philippines and China. South China Sea is also one of the most important maritime corridors, a status which has only become more entrenched as the region's economic growth surges.
And this is certainly something which we're going to be hearing a lot more about. You know, Donald Trump is in the region now. He's over in South Korea talking to the Chinese government. This is going to become a hotly contested issue as China's status as a global power increases and it becomes more and more powerful on the world stage. So keep up with everything that's going on there with us on globalsouthworld.com, on our Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and on our YouTube channel. That's all for now. Catch you next week.